press the
The
top,
light
right?
goes off. It should
Oh,
come on.
okay. Good morning. Since we have a quorum, we're going to go ahead and start. So if we can have roll call.
Present.
Here.
Here. We have a quorum. Okay, the next item is public comments, and are there anyone wishing to speak to the board? Seeing none, we'll go to the next item, and that is to approve the consent calendar and changes to the agenda. Can I have a motion?
There's actually a change to the consent calendar. One of the motions actually listed myself as voting when I wasn't at the last meeting, so that just needs to be replaced with Mr. Sykes' name.
Okay.
So other than that, that's the one change.
Okay,
And I will motion to approve the consent calendar.
okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, with those changes, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
And one abstention.
One abstention. Motion carries.
Thank you.
The regular agenda items are number 1. This is item number 4. Adopt resolution to approve the sale of real property located at 62 South 2nd Street, San Jose, commonly known as the San Jose Theater. Assesses parcel number 467-22137. Turn to staff.
Yes, we have Richard Keat from the successor agency here to discuss this item.
Is the mic on? Yes, good.
Yes.
Hi, Richard Keat, Managing Director, City of San Jose, successor agency to Redevelopment. This is the third time we brought this to the board. The third time, I think, will be the charm. The board recalls the first 2 times that various reasons we rejected and asked the Oversight Board to reject the property sale. The first time there was an interesting problem with the bidding between the 2 highest bidders, and then the second time we went out to bid, we received no bids at the 2.7 million mark. There was one bid at $1,530,000 that didn't meet the minimum bid requirements as posted. The Oversight Board asked us to put it out to bid for 60 days, which we did. We put it on LoopNet and, as always, and CoStar. And also, Mr. Williams, Glenn Williams, asked that we contact the local news media, and we did that with the Business Journal and the Mercury News, and the Mercury News actually put an article out on the property. The bids were due October 29th at 4 p.m., minimum bid of $1,530,000, and we got 3 bids, all credible bids over the minimum bid, with a high bid of $2.1 million, a little over $2.1 million. Monterey and Third Associates, they're affiliated with a very well-known local South Bay commercial developer in Wally Properties, and they happen to be one of the better developers we've worked with over the years, and maybe hopefully some of the other cities in the county have also worked with in Wally. With that, we recommend approval.
Hearing none, can I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second? Oh, sorry.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Is this a roll call vote, Jay? Okay. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. The next item is to receive report from the successor agency to the Redevelopment Agency of the City of San Jose, providing an update on dissolution activities and administrative costs. Turn to staff.
Richard Keat will also present on this.
Yes, we've, over the last, can't believe it's 6 years since dissolution, we've been updating the San Jose Oversight Board on our remaining activities as we set forward to dissolve the agency. In February 2018 and in June, again, we had updated the San Jose Oversight Board, and their request was to update you, the Countywide Oversight Board, as well as discuss briefly administrative costs. So the main table that I'm putting up on the screen and that you have is one of the most interesting. The Table 1 provides for the long-range property management plans, and as you can see, we've approved either through the direct sale process or the open solicitation process, nearly all of our properties that we've owned. And then the second group is the transfer of properties to the city pursuant to approved compensation agreements. And then there are only 2 properties remain to be sold, and you just approved one of those 2 just now. So we're literally down to Sheraton Hotel revenue participation, which we strongly recommend, and it goes into detail in the memo, that we hold off on that sale, and the county actually has agreed with us on that because although we get participation revenue every year, the intricacies of the agreement, we'd be better served when they start paying down the note, the promissory note in I can't remember, it's 2021, I think it's 2021. And long before we pay off our bonds in 2035. And then the last column, on the very 2 properties on the bottom, are the Billy DeFrank Community Center that we're currently working with county staff on. We would need to do a compensation agreement, and much like the Dearborn properties that are anticipated to be sold to Google, we don't know, but the Dearborn properties that are going to go to before our city council in December for an agreement, we do anticipate we'd have to do a compensation agreement with all the taxing entities, and then work out an agreement with the county who wants to acquire the land, who's shown interest in acquiring the land, and for continuation of the community center as the only gay and lesbian, bisexual, transgender community center in the county that we were aware of, and also put an affordable housing project on the project. And then the California Theater, as you know, we've been waiting for the school district to sign the compensation agreement. The other 13 taxing entities signed that almost 2 years ago now. It's just incredible. But our Office of Economic Development is working with the San Jose School District to get their signature, and then we would transfer that. So I don't know if you want to wait for the whole presentation. That's the longest part of the presentation. Or if you have any questions on our property disposition.
Okay. Are there any questions from the board? Glenn?
Thank you. Quick question for you, Richard. On here, I noticed that you list the Dearborn properties as having been transferred to the city. Is that actually correct? Or
Yes, they have.
okay, so they now hold title to them.
They have. All 14 entities, including the school district, which you're right, didn't, as of the last meeting, hadn't signed, as the last meeting we presented at, hadn't signed the compensation agreement. They have. So we have all 14 entities signed.
And the transfer has taken place?
The transfer has taken place, yeah. They have deed on the city of San Jose has the deed.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions? Okay. Go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, just really quickly, the table 2, and I'm not putting them up on the screen, we can, are our 4 active disposition and development agreements. The exciting ones are the first 2 that have to do with North San Pedro and our total 8-block, $24 million grant that we got from the State Department of Housing and Community Development. That work is done. the last $1 million of the grant will be drawn down before the end of the calendar year. And we have all new sidewalks, infrastructure, lighting. And if you've been out there, if you've driven Coleman Avenue, you see 3 of the projects are under construction, 2 townhome projects and a 380-unit podium project. So those DDAs are being they're actively being worked on. And the all-important First Community Housing Project will start early next year. That's the 135-unit affordable project. The other two DDAs we're closely monitoring, and the Parkview Towers project, which has been an extremely difficult project to get underway with the First Church of Christ, is being, the church has been wrapped up for the winter, but improvements have been made, and we're closely watching that development, and our Office of Economic Development is working with the current developer, Fulton Street Ventures. I'm going to go to Table 3, which is by far the largest table, has 33 contracting entities, and these really are provisions that, some of which have are revenue generating, but most have, we just have audit rights and operation and maintenance. And you certainly can ask me any questions now or in the next several months after you review this. But most of these, as I said, we just have audit rights and that are in the CC&Rs. On Table 4, we have the revenue generating items. We do get revenue from Essex Properties, Kana, and we have one that's in default that our attorneys are still looking at, but it's just a single-family home with a homeowner that didn't honor staying in the residence, where their loan is amortized over years of staying in the house. So we intend to deal with that in the near term. The next category is the owner participation in loan agreements. None of these are in default, and one dropped off the table because they paid off the loan. There's a housing investment loan program, which all those agreements are current. There's 4 of those. And we have a commercial loan program on that same page. This is on Table 4, again, with 2 commercial building loans. The camera loan was in default, and our attorneys, we've actually assigned a legal person to review, not one of the attorneys, one of our paralegals, to review if there's any funding available on the loan past due. It was a significant amount of money, $2.4 million. We did ask their accountant for financial statements, and we did get it, and they said they have no money. They've had different movie theaters, but they all form separate LLCs, so we don't believe that there's any money there, but the attorneys still need to figure out whether we want to take them to court, or if it's worthwhile for all the legal time involved when we're 98% sure that there's no funding available. With that, I'll turn it over if you have any questions. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, one other thing. The administrative part of this, the administrative costs, are in the board memo, and what we're doing there is reducing for next fiscal year, well, I'm sorry, for this fiscal year, from the past fiscal year, we went down from 7.28 FTEs to 3.55. Our budget was a little over 1.6 million, down to 907 million. And in January, when the finance team comes back with the ROPS, you'll see that the administrative budget will be even reduced slightly, even though there's obviously quite a bit of work to do with financial reporting on bonds, on debt management, on reporting to the state finance department in the county. And of course, we still have long-term receivables and infinite number of public records requests. So with that, that administrative budget will come forward. And I guess on that note, I'll say this is my last Oversight Board meeting after 6 years of working on the on dissolution with the board, sometimes at odds with the board, but it's been a good relationship. I'm sorry Tony and Matthew aren't here, but it was great working with most of you over these last 6 years. I said even when we had our differences and when we had our differences with the county, we managed to get through it, and I want to thank Tom Murtha, our attorney's office, our city finance team, and of course the agency finance team. There was a major refunder when we refunded our $1.7 billion in 2017 to reduce the number of bonds and to save hundreds of millions of dollars. And even thank County Council even though we've had our disagreements with them as well, to try to navigate the awful written dissolution law by the state attorneys who didn't think through how this process would work very well and help us navigate with the State Department of Finance. With that, I'll now turn it over for questions.
Okay, any questions? Glenn?
Richard, I want to echo your comments and thank you for your service, and it's been a pleasure working with you as well. Can you give us an insight as to, in the future, if you're not going to be here again to present, who would be in the event of a sale of one of the assets or report back to the board on any of the ongoing contingencies?
Well, the city finance department is taking over obviously the finance roles. Lisa Totano's behind, assistant finance director Julia Cooper, and Kevin, who's also sitting behind me. Dave Sykes is still the executive officer of the board, one of your board members, the city manager, and he would be aware of that. But I would work definitely through the city finance department first, and if you had any questions. But I'll be here till December 31st. If you have any great need for information, please email or phone me.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments? Richard, I want to echo what Glenn just said. I started working with the County Oversight Board for San Jose, I believe in 2012 when it started, and worked all the way to the end. So it's been a pleasure, and it's been a great 6 years. Thank you. And this is a information item only. Okay. The next item is item number 6 on the regular agenda, and this is to receive report from the successor agency to the redevelopment agency of the city of Sunnyvale, providing an update on the current remediation efforts on its properties. So I turn it to staff.
Yes, I'll let him get set up, but City Attorney John Nagel is here to present on this item to give you the report.
Thank you, and we have a PowerPoint. Okay. So this is a report of our process in terms of remediation. We'll go through some of the historical and timeline elements with the remediation. Then we'll go and discuss briefly the overview of our remediation. Oh, I need to move it? Okay, I'm sorry. So somebody else is moving or I'm moving? No, you can move it. That's fine. That's one less thing to worry about. Lawyers and technology is one of my standard arguments. Never let lawyers have too much technology. And so then we'll go into the two agreements that affected how the developer and the former redevelopment agency and ultimately the successor agency will share the remediation costs. And then the last part that we'll go into is the implementation of the last agreement that was adopted in 2016 that permits the conveyance of the two properties that are contaminated to the developer. And next slide, please. So 2 slides. So here's the timeline. In the 1900s is when the property was first developed, and then the key point for me, obviously, is the next dot when it's 1940 is when there were 3 dry cleaners that were in Block 5 and 6. And during that time period, obviously, dry cleaning establishments weren't really conscious about chemicals and the environment, and through and we don't precisely know how the PCEs got into the ground and soil and water, but it's either through cracks in the sanitary sewer system or some sort of discharge into the ground. And the land was contaminated for many years through the development of the Sunnyvale Town Center. And then ultimately in 2007, when that center was being demolished, the PCEs were discovered. And in the same year as when the interim remediation measures were installed, and they are still ongoing. And then, as many of you may be aware, after the construction started, the former developer was foreclosed on, and there ended up a very long period of litigation, 8 years, in which no construction occurred. In late 2016, the bank was able to pick a new developer. The success agency accepted that developer, and we began to negotiate with the new developer, which is STC Ventures LLC. And between January of 16 and June of 16 is when we adopted the latest agreement, which addressed a whole variety of issues, tax increments, and also the key to this item is how we were going to deal with Block 5 and Block 6 remediation. At that point, the agreement was approved by the local oversight board and ultimately approved by the Department of Finance, and the findings were that the mechanisms we had set up for transfer of the property to the developer would reduce the environmental liability and reduce the costs, and therefore there would be an increased flow of funds to the taxing entities. And after that, the construction revived, and there were a number of buildings which were, the outsides were complete. They were residential units. One of those buildings is now, I don't know if the grand opening was just a couple weeks ago. It's going to be fully occupied in a very short period of time. The next 2 buildings are scheduled, and I believe all by the end of the year. The existing buildings will be up and fully occupied. And also, there is what's called Building T, which is a Whole Foods on the ground floor and a theater, AMC on the top floor. That is under construction. It is expected to be completed and occupied in November of 2019. So there's been substantial progress made in a short time to get the project up and running again. Also during that time, we've worked with, and we'll go into it a little bit later, with the water board to try and resolve exactly how we will be able to develop the sites. If I could have the next slide, please. So this gives you a little picture of the contamination and its flow. And obviously, we've already mentioned about the dry cleaners being located in 5 and 6, and how the soil and soil vapor and groundwater samples have been taken since 2007 to measure the level of contamination. There is significant PCEs. I believe in the 10 years since we've been pumping, we've dropped it 95%, but PCEs are rather tough chemicals to extract, and the challenge is really going to be that last 5%. If I could have the next slide, please. I've already sort of addressed that we've decreased it significantly, that the groundwater cleanup is still going on. One of the interesting things that we've done was some of the types of cleanups. One was the chlorinization process, where we injected iron filings, and we used specialized drilling equipment to do that. We also put in vegetable oil with naturally occurring bacteria, so they were injected at the same time that would eat it. So we've taken the full spectrum of remediation efforts that we could do, and we've done it obviously in consultation with the water board. And even though we've done the 95% and there's only 5% left, there is significant remediation is anticipated to occur, particularly in Block 6. And though the scope is being determined, we estimate that the cost would be in excess of $1 million. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in the 2010 agreement, the remediation costs were split 50-50. 50% by the redevelopment agency, now the successor agency, and 50% to the developer. Since 2017, the cost for blocks 5 and 6 have exceeded $500,000 for the remediation, and as mentioned earlier, the future years' costs are likely to increase because of additional remediation efforts, and all of these costs for remediation have been on the prior and current year ROPS. Next slide, please. So the 2016 agreement really is the agreement that is important for why we're here today, and obviously for the next item on your agenda. We negotiated a variety of changes to the downtown, and some of those changes, particularly a lot with the contaminated product, we had conversations with Santa Clara County Council's office because obviously there were complications with getting rid of those properties, and we wanted to be able to make sure that the successor agency would be able to dissolve in a timely fashion. We have Lot 1 of Block 6, which is the next item, is a part of security for some cops, so that it could go as long as October of 2022. And so what we did was we negotiated a provision that would allow the transfer of Lot 1 of Block 6 to the developer in a more timely fashion, and we agreed to negotiate about Block 5. And as I mentioned earlier, all of those agreements were approved by the Oversight Board and Department of Finance. Next slide, please. So some of the benefits of that agreement, obviously, is we eliminated the tax increments, which is a liability between 25 and 65 million. We modified the land use, of which I mentioned earlier. We updated the construction schedule, which, as I stated earlier, has already begun. And obviously, the real value to all the taxing entities is the increased property tax values, because now we have a project up and running. And then lastly, we reduced the environmental remediation liabilities of the successor agency. And next slide, please. So I've mentioned it before, so I'll try and be as brief, that Section 4.04 of the 2016 agreement, the Oversight Board and the Department of Finance found that the modifications would result in environmental cost savings to the taxing entities, and the developer, what the language of 4.04 says basically is that upon a request, then the successor agency shall convey the land, provided, however, that we have sufficient time to be able to remove Lot 1 of Block 6 as security for the cops, so that way we would be transferring a fee simple title clear of any of encumbrances to the developer. And in order to do that, we had to get an appraisal and go through a process which will be considered by you in the next item. And the last part is that the agreement also required the developer and the successor agency to confer regularly on the feasibility of transferring Block 5. And Block 5 is a constructed garage on a contaminated site, and that's what makes it a little more challenging. Block 6 is an open surface parking lot, so being able to deal with the remediation is a little easier. And we have been meeting on a regular basis, and we'll continue to meet, but I think until we get a little bit more clarification from the Water Board about what the future remediation costs are, we won't have a resolution to that in the near future, but it won't be the long-term future, obviously. And so, next slide, please. I think I probably already covered most of this. We are meeting, we have gotten the notice, and we are obligated to transfer the parcel, as I mentioned earlier. And I think I've already discussed the issues about the delay for conveyance to remove it. And so with that, I tried to give a high-level description of the remediation, mostly because I am not an environmental attorney, so getting into the weeds would be something that I really couldn't do competently. If you have detailed questions, I may be able to answer some of them. We may be able to get information to you if we need, but at this point, I'll be happy to take any questions that the board has.
Okay, are there any questions from the board? Glenn?
Thank you. First of all, I want to apologize for my level of ignorance about all of this. I've had the benefit of sitting on 4 successor agency oversight boards preceding this, but not been familiar with Sunnyvale. So I apologize if my questions are a little bit juvenile. In terms of the overview of the site, I had the benefit of having Deke Hunter give me a presentation last Thursday as part of a public session, so I am somewhat familiar with the project. In terms of Site 5 now, you said that's currently got a parking garage located on it?
Yes, Block 5 is a parking garage.
Is the garage currently used, or is it sitting idle?
It is completed, but not totally. It's in the process of being brought up so Block 5 is here with the parking garage, and it's meant to serve Building T, which is right next to it, which is the Whole Foods and the theater. So it's a public parking garage for the entire downtown, but obviously it's located more in closer proximity to those 2 developments. So it's going to be open when the theater and Whole Foods is open, so it'll be able to serve both those facilities as well as general public parking.
Does the PCE contamination extend underneath the site of the Whole Foods in that development?
I will have to look at the map. Let's see. It's the other map I have, excuse me.
He's clarified for me that it does not.
I'm trying to look. I am not an expert on the plume, so I'm looking at where the Building T is and trying to compare it to the slide that we have here.
I'm comfortable that it doesn't, based upon the illustrations that we've been provided.
No, it has not.
Thank you.
And it has extended across the street, I know that, and because we have an extraction well across the street from the garage.
A separate subject, sort of. Has the city explored the possibility of getting any kind of indemnity insurance for its portion? And if so, what have been the results of that?
Well, what the agreement calls for is that we would negotiate with the developer to transfer it, but one of the other alternatives included the ability for us to purchase liability insurance, yes. It is an option.
Do you have any estimate at this time what the cost of that would be?
I know that our risk manager has gotten, but I apologize, I don't know the cost of the premium.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Are there any other questions from the board? Okay. This is for information only, so thank you very much. The next item is item 7, and that is to adopt a resolution to approve and authorize the successor agency to the Redevelopment Agency of the City of Sunnyvale to execute documents related to the removal of a property from 1998 facility lease. Staff?
Yeah, I'll let Mr. Nagel present on it, but I did want to make note that you were provided a supplemental information this morning, and the termination agreement that was attached as an exhibit to the resolution was updated. The red line version doesn't actually show the red lines, so you'll see that they're both basically the same document. There was just an error in the PDF. So we'll fix that later. But just so you know, the only addition, the only amendment that was made is to the second whereas clause. They just added added specifically that the block 6 that is being removed. So I just want to make that point.
And I believe you provided them a copy of the facility lease in the first and second amendments. Is that on the dais also?
Yeah, that was added as a supplemental info as well.
Any questions? Hearing none, can I have a motion?
I move to approve.
Do I have a second? Okay. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries.
And I want to thank you all very much for your support.
Okay, the next item is adjourned, but let me just make a comment. There may need to be a special meeting before the end of the year, and we'll defer to the Santa Clara.
Yeah, when we have a better idea of when, we'll talk about that. Because I don't think we know when at this point, correct?
That's correct. And so with that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting to the next regular meeting on Monday, January 14, 2019 at 10 a.m. Thank you very much.